Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Got a good guest tonight. Had him on before, Ken Schwartz. And Ken sent me an article today about Stanley Kubrick and Eyes Wide Shut. And so this prompted me to write a post on Facebook and X that's gotten a lot of attention. So I'm just going to read it real quick. It's not going to take long, and then we'll start our conversation. So I say, let's see. Kubrick warned us about our insane military in Paths of Glory. Kubrick warned us about pedophiles in Lolita. Kubrick warned us about the insane deep state in Doctor Strangelove. Kubrick warned us about how AI will eventually turn on us and will try to kill us in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick warned us about adrenochrome and mind control in A Clockwork Orange. Kubrick warned us about MK Ultra and the moon landings in The Shining. Kubrick warned us about the Epstein class in Eyes Wide Shut. Now you know why he's the greatest of all time. And he is. And that's why, because he was brave enough to tackle issues that other filmmakers wouldn't even get near. And somehow he bought his autonomy until the very end, when I think now, in retrospect, he probably was offed. But anyway, hey Ken, how you doing?
Oh, doing great.
Good, good. So Ken, as you guys know, he's the creator of C60, the alchemical fluid that causes people to live a long time. And I believe that it may be the prima materia of alchemy. I actually found in an old alchemy book. I tried to find it to show you. It was online, and somehow I lost it. I'm starting to try to find it again, but it was a text that described harvesting candle wicks and then soaking them in oil, some kind of weird oil. I'm not sure what it was, and and that would give you long life. So just like you told me once that you could get it out of candle wax. So C60 is what exactly? To remind the people who
Oh,
haven't watched us.
well, let me grab my little prop for that.
Okay. I also found that creatine. I started taking creatine lately.
Yeah,
That's really good for you.
yes, it does. Well, carbon 60 is a molecule of carbon, 60 carbon atom shaped exactly like a little soccer ball. Got
Yep.
discovered in 1985, Nobel Prize in 96. And then when they went for testing for toxicity, it actually increased the lifespan of Wistar rats by 90%. And it's basically, I'll just make it short because we don't have all that much time. It's a superoxide dismutase catalase mimic. So it takes care of superoxide. That's an oxygen. Like if you got oxidative damage, right? An oxygen with an extra electron, that's a superoxide. That's the most damaging oxidative radical in the body. And then the other is the hydroxyl ion, and that's basically a water molecule where the proton's missing. So it's got this wild electron ready to grab something, and that's what C60 interacts and goes right in your mitochondria where it restarts mitochondria function. Because as we get older, our superoxide dismutase and catalase, which
Yep.
deal with those, goes down, and so C60 replaces that missing stuff, and then your mitochondria can ramp back up, so you get more ATP, pregnenolone, which is hormones, and a few other things, and that's kind of what C60 does. It just rolls your health and kind of back about 15 years. Well, especially for us gray hair crowds. That's where the people really notice its value.
Well, I don't know. I've been taking it regularly now for really regularly for 3 years. And that would be every day, quite a bit. And my stamina is amazing. I'm blowing myself away, and I don't get tired as fast as I used to. And I'm hiking up the side of the mountain and not losing a step. So I feel pretty good about that.
Oh, good to hear. Yeah, yeah, people should do it. It's C60 Power is the website. It's
I'll link to it.
shopc60.com is the actual website, and you can go there and kind of explore. We got a variety of oils. We've got gummies. In gummies, we've got some really great health. Facial products that really do actually scientifically proven to reduce lines and wrinkles. So And so it's something probably you want to check out. And I've talked about it before. There's actually, if you go to the C60 Purple Power channel, there are like hundreds of interviews with doctors and others. Then you can, if you have a condition, you could probably find some doctor talking there about it.
Yeah, I got a pretty severe sunburn last summer. I put some of that oil on, your skin oil on it, and it went away in one day. It was gone. I couldn't believe how fast it reduced the inflammation.
Yep.
So what's new with the with your free energy stuff?
Well, it's I guess I don't know for people that just tuning in. There's Jay and I have talked about this before in Reality Check. There's like the videos you might want to look to is monoatomic gold is not real. Stanley
Oh yeah.
Meyer and free energy and alchemy is real. And if you go back and just look in the play, that's I mean, it would take a whole thing just to talk about it. But basically, what it's called oxygen-driven fusion, I call it MOXIE fusion, metal oxygen fusion. It's like millions of times easier to fuse an oxygen with metal, and I include hydrogen as a metal in these situations, and than it is to do like the hydrogen fusion that you've always heard about, which they spent $100 billion on and completely failed to produce anything. So whereas C60, there's applications that are already over Unity. So, and what's come up recently is there's some researchers in Taiwan, and I've sent some leaks. And one of the latest is a YouTube. Well, they basically, Dr. Hong published a paper in Science Review, in Nature Science Review. That's back last year, and did a presentation at the ICCX 26. And but basically, there's a video. I think Jay will probably post that in the show notes. YouTube video, and they basically go Mr. Yushan, and he's Dr. Yushan, I guess I should say, and he's running they have a cavitation reactor, which is basically somnoluminescence, and it's when you kind of have these bubbles that kind of collapse and they make a glow. What's really going on there is it's an electrostatic spark, the same sort of spark you do when you rub your feet on the carpet and get the metal, but it's just happening inside of water. So there's an excess of hydrogen and oxygen. So we know it's a basic electrolysis going on, but with a bubble rather than two electrodes. And he has a video where he shows, basically if you look at you have the atomic spectrometer, which mass spectrometer, which can tell what these elements are that are coming out. And he goes in there and he shows normally, there's oxygen ratios. Like in most of oxygen, if in water, ratio is usually 99.7% is O16, something like 0.4% is O17, and then 0.2% is O18. But in this case, they've been running the reactor for a while, so you see the oxygen 16 is almost the same as the oxygen 18. And then there's a little oxygen 17 in between, which is out. I mean, that's huge, right? And then at the very end, you see a little bit of fluorine 19. Basically, what they've been doing is they basically take a regular hydrogen, they just add it to an oxygen 17, which then to an oxygen 16, which then makes an oxygen 17. Then they add a hydrogen to an oxygen 17. And 17 tends to fuse faster than oxygen 16, and that makes an oxygen 17. And then 17 fuses with the hydrogen to make an oxygen 18. Then the oxygen 18 is fusing with another hydrogen to make fluorine 19, and that's a new element. So you could always argue, oh, those are just isotopes of oxygen, but here we got that's alchemy basically. They're making new elements, and if you slide your eyes down the chart, you'll see 32, and that's like the two oxygen 16s go together, they make like a sulfur 32. And what's really interesting, Dr. Hong is kind of like the director on this whole project. And he discovered some stuff that I thought was really interesting. When you get two oxygen 17 fused together, I was thinking it'd make sulfur 34, but they discovered it makes carbon 12, which comes out as carbon monoxide, and neon 22, which was unexpected. But there's a guy, Udo Lars. He has it's called the structured atom model. It's like the actual nucleus of the atom has a specific structure. And if you read his book, which is The Nature of the Atom, I don't even know if you can buy it anymore, but you could certainly get a Kindle version. And it'll basically explain why that's doing it. And then I think when oxygen 16 goes with oxygen 17, what's happening is you'll see a big spike of silica. And I think what's happening is we're getting a production of alpha particle, which is a helium nucleus, out of the thing. And then a hydrogen flies off and you get a silica atom. And Earth's made of silica. Got a lot of sulfur, and that kind of, that's kind of what it's just alchemy. It's Moxie fusion, oxygen-driven fusion. The Taiwanese have pretty much, it can't be debated anymore. It's not
So
like,
is this similar to cold fusion?
yeah, it is cold fusion.
It is cold.
They always thought, all these people thought they were packing deuterium or something in a lattice and it was fusing to make helium. But what actually was happening is oxygen was fusing with the lattice, like it fused with platinum, make a radioactive xenon, which vented into the atmosphere of the laboratory. Or, if they're using platinum for the lattice, the oxygen would fuse with the platinum to make radioactive radon, which we know how bad that is. And that's kind of why, the cold fusion dudes in 1989, that's why it's the late Dr. Fleischmann. He basically, and also because it lowers the Coulomb barrier. That's the energy you need to fuse two things together. It was given out an X-ray band rather than the gamma ray bands. So what
So they
happens?
were testing for the radon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they weren't testing for the radon, and they're walking around with Geiger counters looking for gamma rays while they're actually being X-rayed. In fact, that's the reason I was using the C60, because they did a thing where you basically gave one set of rats C60, the other didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. The C60 rats lived, where the control group died, of course. And so we were taking it during the experimentation, and we're all still around, by the way. So it did work. But so if you're exposed to radiation or you're going to be doing any Moxie fusion, make sure you get yourself some C60 just to protect yourself from.
Is there any way to make it safe?
Oh yeah, you just put shielding in, and we had shielding. We suspected this was it, but you never know when it's research, right? There's just way too many dead PhDs and professors associated with this kind of research, and we proved that's what it was. But at the time, we hadn't proved it, so it could have been something else entirely different. But so C60, I mean, quite frankly, you might want to get some C60 right now from shopc60.com before the nukes go off in the Middle East, and the fallout comes flooding over our country like it did in Fukushima. So, it's something to maybe, think about getting that before, the rush hits, because then it might be too late. And it's looking like they're going to go back to war here, maybe tomorrow. So,
Yep. Does look like that.
But that's not what we're talking about, kind of.
No, but it's a very interesting, what's going on in the Middle East is very interesting. Very interesting. Never seen anything quite like it, actually. So Pons died from radiation.
Fleischmann did.
Or Fleischmann, I mean.
Yeah. Well,
Why did Pons die?
Yeah, Pons, he just died of old age. He went back to France.
Yeah, but why didn't he die?
Oh, he just died later. He didn't. He stopped doing a lot of the research, because what it was, they were doing the research for this cold fusion stuff at the University of Utah. I think the same place Charlie got shot. And so they were doing it there, and they discovered that they were getting excess heat out of a chemical reactor
Yep.
on the tabletop. And of course, they announced it, and there was a big stink. And we're going to talk a little bit about Epstein was behind a lot that happened. Where that guy's everywhere, and basically they just made it. They really kind of crushed Fleischmann and Pons, and we're going to.
I remember.
Yeah, and Fleischmann stayed and kept doing the research and getting irradiated and breathing radon and xenon, whereas Pons just said, "Screw this," and he just went back to France, where he was well respected, and he could eat Badeks and drink wine and not have to deal with all the bullshit that was happening in the United States by the brutal press. But I think this is maybe where we bring in Mr. Epstein.
Yeah, so when you sent me that thing about Epstein, really got me thinking, how many things is this guy involved in, right? I mean, it's not just child trafficking for the elites, which is bad enough, but man, he's involved in AI research. He's involved in technologies. He's hanging out with all these top professors at Harvard, and you're like, who is this guy, right? And then he sent me that one, and I was just like, now he's involved in free energy. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, basically, I could we'll probably put those stories in the links down below the show. But, I did the discovered Moxie fusion. Well, I didn't rediscover it. It was done by Osawa Kushi back in the late 1950s. They got suppressed. I was with the right people at the right time. We did it in the early 2011 or something is really when we did most of the research. And I went for a patent in 2015. In fact, I've got a second patent I went for, which they're rejecting now, but that may change as we'll discuss. And basically, they just basically said, we are not going to patent any LENR research. That's low energy nuclear reactions, which is like another name for cold fusion.
Yep.
So no cold fusion, no LENR. And, there wasn't really an explanation on why that was happening. And but we have discovered what is happening because, as you know, the Epstein emails leaked, and so they were released. That was one of the things they had to release. Though, just remember, folks, most of the Epstein material has not been released. The overwhelming majority of it, they've especially that associated with a certain president we know. And basically came out that Epstein was bragging in the research how he killed pawns. Now, he wasn't saying physically he killed
Fleshman.
Yeah, well, Fleischman died. No, but in his emails, he said he killed Pons because Pons was kind of like the bigger dude in the whole thing. That's why he went, because he was a big dude from France and he went back to France. But he was claimed that he was behind ending the funding for Pons and Fleischman's research. And basically, this is what the story is when you read between the lines, and you can read there's several articles and I think a little YouTube video. And what happened is when it came out, there's a lot of hot fusion research out there. And to build a hot fusion reactor, you got to spend like $100 million. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of cash in that. And Epstein had been, hanging out with top scientists and inviting them to his island and condo and in New York, where they probably indulged themselves in certain activities. And so he had a lot of contacts there, and he was spending a lot of money. He had a lot of money, Greece and things too. That's how he got to hang out with them, because he was providing them with funding. And so when they had a problem and they saw this, if you could do it a cold fusion thing for a few $1,000s, you're getting the fusion results that these other dudes get for $100 million in a giant reactor. Well, that's a threat to your funding. So they were pretty worried. So they called Epstein was a fixer. I mean, he did tax evasion, he did money laundering, and he was a fixer, right? So they called him up and said, hey, we got this problem here, because if this stuff keeps going, it's going to cut us off from the funding. We're going to be out of a job, right? So Epstein said, well, I can help you. And so what he did is he basically went down to Congress. He even allegedly testified before a Congress committee down there, but he knew a lot of congressmen. There's a lot of congressmen that, visited the island and visited this condo where he provided services, cash and other little things that those pizza, yeah, that the congressmen like. And so, he, like one of the congressmen he says was Wayne Owens of Utah, basically a senator of Utah. He only did one term there. We don't know exactly why, but so basically he went and talked there. He even claimed he talked to the head of the Mormon church to shut this stuff down before. That's interesting. What is Epstein talking to the Mormon church? There's a little story there somebody needs to explore. But basically what they did is they basically shut down all the cold fusion. All the hot fusion scientists of the world got together and just crushed it and said it's all fake, it's all terrible, blah, blah, blah. Anybody that does this, and they just persecuted anybody that had anything to do with cold fusion. Or that's why they came up with the word LENR, because cold fusion had become such a bad thing. But now we know with like the Dr. Hong and Dr. Yushan at the University of Taiwan, that this is real. I mean, I published my paper in 2015, and which pretty much proved the whole thing, gave it like the background of it, and then like the University of Valencia and the Scotia group basically redid our experiments and republished theirs in like 2020, and then we have now the group Dr. Hong and his, they published in Nature Science Reviews. So I mean, there's just multiple. You cannot deny this is fake, right? It's real. People are doing it. And so basically.
So what did Epstein do?
Oh, he just basically talked to these congressmen and, congressmen he had a relationship, and they just crushed all funding. They banned funding for basically what
But he didn't really kill Pons.
No, he didn't. He killed the project, right? He killed the possibility. He should have said he killed cold fusion, but he just joked, I killed Pons because, Pons was the guy that was promoting it. And that's his basic, that's just what he was communicating to one of his buddies in the emails. That's how we know about it.
So
but it became government policy, and that policy worked its way down to the patent office. And so here, one of the greatest discoveries of, well, I guess last century, but now it's the 20th century. And, the Taiwanese have put a lot of money into this now. because I talked to Dr. Hong or communicated with him, emails and stuff. And so he's got all of our research. And so they're going to jump ahead from where they are now to the next level. And believe me, all the other communications I have, you can always, I'm not going to give methods and materials on how I do it, but every time we've been communicating with governments or agencies in Asia, the China comms are right there getting everything. Their spies are everywhere. So they were doing like $6.5 billion fusion research this year, and all of a sudden it jumped to 8 billion. So where's that other 1.5 billion going into? I'll just let you guess. And the U.S., I actually decided, because the Chinese are heading the way, the Taiwanese are there, the Japanese are on it, but well, they're probably still doing building consensus and doing meetings. It takes them a little longer to get things moving down. So this is happening, and there's a few places in Europe that are doing this. Like they have an Engineering 8 came out. I used to talk with them, and they came out with their new fusion reactor that they announced in Italy recently. I should have gave you that link on that one. But, they used to always be deuterium packers, where they'd pack deuterium in a metal lattice. All of a sudden, they're talking about using water, right? Which is what we were doing. We were basically using heavy water in an argon atmosphere with electrical discharge to make metal oxygen fusion very effectively, right? And then the Scotia group just reproduced our results. And then the Wuhan, the guys in Taiwan, they're basically doing water, it's MOXIE fusion, oxygen-driven fusion, whatever name you want. And so, and basically what it comes out to be, if you read those, if you go back to the monoatomic gold is not real and Stanley Meyer and free energy, basically it turns every gallon of seawater into the equivalent of 100 gallons of gasoline. If you take out the deuterium, which is 1/7,000th of seawater, and you put it, it's like 100 gallons of gasoline. So in energy equivalency. So basically it's not free energy, but next to free energy and there's a lot of water in the oceans. So
there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff coming out right now. X is full of people putting up their free energy systems. They aren't what you're talking about, but they're using magnets and things. And then there's I just saw an advertisement for a stove that runs off of water, and it divides the hydrogen and the oxygen and then just burns the hydrogen. And you fill it up with water. It sits on your stove, and you have two burners, and it's wasn't even that expensive. I think it was only like $300.
Yeah, that's the HHO stuff. And that's kind of what Stanley Meyer, if you go back to the one, Stanley Meyer and free energy, the video we did a long time ago.
Yeah.
One of the things when you do electrolysis, all the deuterium stays in, the electrolysis thing, and only the hydrogen comes out.
Right.
That's why in Stanley Meyer's things, basically what it was, I gave a talk about MOXIE fusion, and this old guy came up and talked to me, and he had actually been Stanley Meyer's assistant in the 1970s. And when Stanley Meyer was running his fusion reactor, he basically turned a flathead VW engine with a bunch of stuff attached to it into an over unity engine running on water. He used heavy water, and the neutral gas he was using was argon. So he basically turned an internal combustion engine into an over unity fusion reactor. Pretty much anybody could do that. And Stanley Meyer put up his patents. Now he left out, he never told anyone, hey, this is what's going on. But he always told him, hey, if you're going to get your hydrogen, use seawater, because seawater is preferentially higher in deuterium than because evaporation kind of leaves deuterium in the ocean water, whereas it's lighter water that comes out. But he was kind of, he didn't want to give away his secrets. So, but we know his secrets now, and you can go online and watch it all. And so basically, if you can turn an internal combustion engine into an over unity fusion reactor, that's all she wrote, folks. And
can people find how to do that on the internet somewhere?
Oh yeah, there's I think I'll send you the link. I was on Jeff Rentz's show, and he kind of set up a little page. I'll go find that and send that to you. If I haven't sent it already, I'll just send it again, and you could just go there, and we talk about it. Then he has a whole bunch of links, so you can just go get
But
that.
if they're putting out they're advertising a stove that runs off of water. Isn't the secret now starting to break out into the open?
Oh yeah, well that's happening. Well, that's what happened. I gave because China was leading and Taiwan's there too, and
This is an Asian company
oh yeah,
that's
yeah, and Japan was not far behind, and I figured, well, this is probably not too good. Not that I'm a particular patriot because so much bullshit, and the patent office has jacked me twice. So I decided I wrote a letter to to Chris Wright. He's kind of like the head of the Department of Energy, and for a birthday present, say, hey, you guys might want to look into this. The next thing you know, here in April, when let's see, let's make sure that I get this Advanced Research Projects Agency just came out with its funding here, and it's the biggest funding for fusion research. But they had new categories that they didn't have before. One was like transformative fusion concepts and unconventional confinement. So
this
all
is
of a sudden,
what are these? These are patent office.
no, this is the Department of Energy that gives out money for funding stuff, and so they just had they all of us. It's the biggest for fusion that they've ever had, like it's the biggest budget thing they've ever had, and they have like new categories in it. So is there a little connection there? I don't know. They haven't contacted me, though they did send a nice, interesting black helicopter in my backyard. I could have literally jumped up and grabbed the rail, but I didn't. That would be a bad idea. It was in the middle of the night. And so yeah, so here's that. At least America's in the race because if I didn't do anything, Japan and
That
China
actually makes me feel better, actually.
and Taiwan, yeah, those countries would have passed the finish line before the United States even knew the race was started. So at least
So
even
what,
though the U.S. is falling is doesn't even know what's happening. At least now they know what's happening and they've past the start line. They're
so
way back behind the
so
eight.
are
So
we
they
are
got
we
a
going to be
chance.
able to like make furnaces that run on water?
No, but basically you could make Moxie fusion reactors. Yeah, it's easy to make a lot of heat with the heavy water Moxie fusion reactor. That's what like the EG8 people are doing, Engineering 8. They're basically doing.
So there's a whole plethora of products that could be created here that we would no longer need gasoline or
Oh
in.
yeah, they've already like EG8 they're using water now rather than deuterium like they were before. I wonder where they got that idea. I used to talk to them, but once they got some success, somehow they stopped talking to me.
So
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Basically,
you could actually run it like a um you could heat you know what a sand heater is?
oh yes, I do.
So you could actually heat the sand with the same technology that they're using to make stoves and all this other stuff. You just heat the sand and it stays hot for 24 hours and your whole house stays warm and you didn't spend a dime of energy. Is that where we're heading?
Well, you could do the Stanley Meyer technique, but just close loop it. Because one of the things is Stanley Meyer's car would stay over unity till they ran out of argon gas, which is the moderators. You got to have that moderator because if you just use regular heavy water and the electric spark and irregular air, you get like jack, very, very little.
But
But when
these
you,
stoves aren't using that
yeah,
technology.
yeah, well, they're just using the hydrogen. They're just making electricity, busting it up, and then using the hydrogen because using basically the HHO gas, but they're not making like fusion because that's not the next level. But if you did the next level, like the guys in Taiwan, they're using regular water and they're making the water warm, but they're not making it hot. But when you use deuterium, which is heavy water, deuterium's like an isotope of hydrogen, but it has a neutron on it. At that point, you can get it to boil if you do it right, and then you could make steam. But Stanley Meyer was just using it to turn an internal combustion engine into an over unity thing. So you could technically have like an internal combustion engine, close loop it, run it off deuterium, heavy water, and argon, and you could just basically produce all the electricity you want forever, as long as you keep putting heavy water into it. So, so yeah,
Heavy
basically,
water is seawater.
no, well, it's an extract of seawater. It takes the deuterium out. Most all seawater is like a regular oxygen with regular hydrogens, right? Plain H's. But about 1/7,000th of those hydrogens is deuterium, and that's a heavy water. That's a proton with an extra neutron. In fact, that's how they make hydrogen bombs. They basically take a tiny atomic bomb and they surround it with basically deuterium, heavy water, and then set it off, and that's how you get it. You can't do it with regular hydrogen, but with deuterium, your kick is way bigger. And that's why when I was doing Moxie fusion, we were using heavy water, not regular water, because the yield is so much larger than just regular water. Now, the Taiwanese have shown you can get some yield out of regular water, and that's, they published in Nature Science Reviews, so that's pretty serious. So, it's just there, but what's interesting is the leaks that came out of China. I think I sent you those articles.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause this stuff's starting to leak out. You're seeing it on stuff on X. You're seeing it, the atomic energy DOE here in the States, and in China they had these things came out that there's a kind of like a leak about basically something happening in Wuhan about they had like an over unity cold fusion kind of thing going on, which is interesting because if you go to China and you check things like Beijing has a good fusion program. And the Sichuan province, it's got a fusion program. Fujian province, the Anhai province got a fusion program. Even the Gansu province has a fusion projects that are already known, right? But there's been nothing about there's nothing about the Hubei province, which is where Wuhan is found, right? So, but all of a sudden, but we already know that Wuhan's pretty good at leaking things.
What
So,
does that mean? I mean, that they have what are they working on? They're working on cold fusion?
yeah, they basically said something they were using metal hydrides, which is basically metal and oxygen, which is Moxie fusion. So evidently they were getting some good success with Moxie fusion, and somebody started talking, and the CCP came down hard on them because they've obviously got some. Look at the oil crisis here. If you can
Why would
power
the
your country,
wait a minute, why would the CCP come down on them? China
well,
doesn't have any oil.
well,
They
because no, that's exactly they don't have any oil, but and they're the ones paying the research fees, right? Those guys they aren't being financed by
But
industry.
why
They're
would
being
they come
financed.
down on the people working on cold fusion?
Oh no, they came down on the people that were leaking it. You don't want to have other people leak. If you're doing secret research to get ahead of everybody else economically, you don't want some fool down there leaking the information out to your competitors. That's like bad business and bad strategy. So they
Yeah, but
basically
they're outside of Japan and Taiwan. Maybe the Russians are working on it, but we're not really doing any research here in the United States.
well, we are now, but I had to kick it's like the mule. You got to hit them on the side of the head to get their attention. So they're starting to do some in the States, but that's entirely it only is happening. All the oxygen-driven fusion on the world today, I'm the one that started it. I mean, obviously, Osawa and Kushi did it back in the 60s. They got suppressed. So I've been working pretty hard for the last 10 years to get this whole new concept out to people. And it's success in Taiwan, it's success in China, happened in Japan, and maybe even now at the DOE. So, it's been a long haul. Probably what 20 more years, that more than 20 years now, but it's starting to actually bear fruit, and people are starting because it's real. I mean, they're just solid. If you watch that video of Dr. Yushan and the atomic mass spectrometer, you could just it's 100% proven, right? It's not fake like the a patent office, but that's what Epstein does, because
Is
the
is the Fleshman project working on this stuff?
no, he died. Pons
No,
died. The
no,
universe.
no. The project keeps going. It goes on. It's got that British guy.
Oh yeah, no, he just wanders. Oh, you mean Agent Grenier? Well, Agent Grenier is actually Bob Grenier is in the video. He's the one that took the video, and yeah, he's a mysterious character who generously borrows from other people's work, including Ido Lars here, and somehow he's always seems to be everywhere where something's happening, and he doesn't seem to have a source of income, but there he is. So I just call him Agent Bob, who's out there to maybe to see what's going on and maybe spread it about a bit.
Well,
So
seems like he's spreading pretty good information.
yes, he is. He's out there doing his part. But so he's the one running about, and he did the video and has
He
been
did make a video that was pretty wild. I remember about a year and a half ago, he was saying a whole bunch of stuff that was going to happen that didn't happen. So, yeah.
yeah.
Then there's the Australian guy. What's his name?
Oh
Worked for the Navy. Um,
oh, you mean the that
What's
what
his
do they call
name?
the lightning storm generator thing?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, that kind of
he was
disappeared
like,
because
he was right there on the edge. He got Randall Carlson involved, and then they went on Joe Rogan, and Rogan won't play the show because he said the guy was so outrageous that he was too embarrassed. I know somebody that talked to him, and he told him that he was the president of Scotland.
yeah,
No,
yeah. So
the king of Scotland.
yeah, the King of Scotland.
And
Well,
then he
yeah,
got,
yeah, the thunderstorm generator. It was big at the what was that conspiracy conference I went to in Raleigh, North Carolina.
they didn't have that this year, I know.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't even go. It was kind of Bob was there, and but the year before that guy had been there, and they wouldn't even talk about him the last year, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would. He was like a big headliner the
Is that
year
Chris
before, and then the next year, not even a mention. So
Yeah,
I
he's
think
off the charts. He was on the charts everywhere for about a year, and
well,
then boom,
uh,
gone,
well, I
baby.
think maybe there might have been a little bit of scam behind that, and everybody got egg on their face and decided
I'm not
let's
sure
just
about that. I think it's something else. I think
yeah.
because the Navy is behind a lot of this research.
Oh, they're always there watching things, but
Oh, well,
yeah,
they're also doing a lot of research. They do
yeah.
all the research on cavitation, and that all came out of the Navy. And so, him coming out, and also that one guy, Salvador. Um,
Oh yeah, but yeah, that's
he
yeah,
was
but
also in the Navy.
the guy's still around. The thunderstorm generator dude's
Oh yeah,
around.
he's still around.
It's just not going anywhere. Nothing's happening, and he I think basically when people went and did the third party testing, it didn't turn out the way he said it was happening. So
Yeah, it's
that's
really
basically
really strange because his physics actually made sense,
yeah. But when
but
they
it
did the
didn't.
testing, yeah, I think
But
what
it
happened
didn't work
was
out. So it's
well, yeah, yeah. So when they
very
did this
strange
testing,
thing.
yeah.
You have to wonder if it wasn't some kind of psyop.
Well, think of all the psyops, like the flat Earth. I mean, that was a completely military. I think it was actually two guys betted. We can get these people to believe that the Earth is flat, and it worked.
Well, no, it came out with that Obama advisor who warned about conspiracy theories.
Oh yeah, well yeah that.
His
Well, when
name.
the one for the flat Earth thing, they found these guys.
Oh,
They
no,
was
I tracked down the whole flat Earth. Flat Earth was a contract employee at NASA, the new flat Earth. The
yeah
it was he was from Toronto, and he was a graphic artist working at NASA. And they brought him into a room. And they showed him the flat Earth map and said, "This is what it looks like." And then he immediately left NASA and started going all over the country, somehow financed, talking about the flat Earth. And then he got all the other flat earthers involved, and they're all involved. And it was a psyop. It was a
well
complete.
yeah. Well, this is what I've heard that there originally was like two guys in the intelligence agencies made a bet with each other. And the one guy said, "I bet I can get people to believe that the Earth is flat." And the other guy said, "That's bullshit." But he got funding for it, and so he hired these NASA engineers to bring in. They kind of identified a person, and they brought so the guy went in there, and they had all these NASA engineers with their badges on, right? And then they show him the map, and the dude's just freaking out, like, "Oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever!" But of course, afterwards, they all went to dinner, had drinks, and all got probably paid a little gratuity to pull this off. And so they found like remember that one guy that lived by a Air Force Base in New Mexico that
Yeah.
eventually killed himself
Um,
because uh,
what's his name?
Wines
No,
was Weinstein or
no.
something like that.
He observed UFOs flying over the base there outside of Albuquerque.
Yeah, exactly. And then they convinced him, and then they got that Dowd guy got
Yeah.
involved, and
Yeah.
then they convinced him, and basically they just drove his ass crazy. And yeah, by feeding him all this crazy information, and he
They drove
eventually
him
just killed
completely
himself.
insane.
Yeah, so that was a successful. Yeah, military intelligence operations happen all the time, and
Except that the sheriff there, that in the county where, because he's the first guy that came out and said that there was a base at Dulce.
yeah,
Okay, sheriff, I think his name was Garcia. Can't remember. I met him one time. He started driving around Dulce because he heard the rumors, right? And he found a door He found a secret door that you could see the rim of it that was clearly just like the rock that the base is on. And he also said that he would listen. He had some kind of device where he could listen in and he could hear stuff going on inside the mountain there. So even though the guy was completely mind controlled, he did actually have some valid information. He flew
Well,
over.
look,
He was a pilot too. This
yeah,
guy,
remember,
I can't remember.
yeah, well, you know, they're even doing a hearing on all those 11 scientists which have died or disappeared here. I mean, that's a big thing. Of like those three, they're involved in some of that magic memory metal
Oh
and
yeah,
some other stuff, and they just like all
plasma physicists.
up and disappeared. One
Yep,
was like the top, I think was it a colonel or a general that was running one of those top secret
yep.
projects, and he just retired, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared, and then his
What do you
assistant.
think that is? I think they've been taken in by the military complex to be
That
used.
or they've rubbed them out. There's actually a history. I was listening to a dark journalist last Friday.
Yeah.
He to talked about like one. They had this one guy, an ex-Navy SEAL or whatever, I think, came up, and he had been, or maybe it was a Green Beret. He had been like offered to pay money to kill this one
Yeah.
researcher that
Yeah.
was just retiring. Right, the guy's turned 65. He's going to retire, and he was offered to kill that guy just to shut him up. Right, because he's retired now. He's out. He could start flapping his lips, and so they just wanted to shut that down.
It seems
And
like a lot of horsepower to get rid of. I
yeah,
mean,
well, and the guy did eventually die, right? In mysterious way, he died. So, the one guy that they wanted, that
but
one guy
these guys
refused to
aren't
kill
dead,
him.
they're missing.
Yeah, some of them are missing. Yeah, that they're missing, but that's yeah, missing. When you have a body, you got a problem. When you no body, then what's going on? We don't know. So that would probably be the
I would
way.
think they're too valuable to kill. I would just kidnap them and use them.
Yeah, they could be, and
Especially that guy that the plasma physicist. That
yeah,
guy
yeah,
was like
yeah. That's
way,
so there. Yeah, so they've
way too
there's some.
valuable to kill.
Yes, yeah.
What
So
I
that's
think is each one of these scientists was getting close to something that they couldn't afford to have them get close to. And since they were operating at high levels, they just took them into secrecy and are using them. I think they did the same thing with who's the guy that invented the computer? Neuro, who was his name? Back in the early 50s? Um, Forget it, Newman, Jean von
Newman.
Neumann. Right. I think he was, I don't think he died. I think he was taken out and put into a secret program. Same with Jack Parsons. I don't,
Yeah.
they didn't find any trace of him in the explosion.
Yeah,
No,
that's what I heard too, that he had, yeah, they didn't find it blew up, but they didn't find, much
yeah,
trace of him. And so it's, yeah, but they have another thing like when Dark Journalist talks about X Protect, and they've had like a program of people that talk too much about it or are going to expose things. And I mean, even comes down to like Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy that, they were pushing, because I think, who was that? E. Edward Hunt before they threw him in jail for Watergate. His buddy who's asked
E.
him was
Howard.
E. Howard Hunt. Yeah, E. Howard Hunt. He asked him, why did they whack Kennedy? And Dark Journalist claims that the guy told E. Howard Hunt told the guy that it was because he was going to give away our greatest secret to the Soviets, the UFO file. And so yeah, the X Protect goes all anyway. That's what they were claiming, but the X Protect is just all around this stuff. And now they have SpaceX. There's always this. Then there's X, which is the people. So it's kind of like what do they call that? Symbology or anyway that X goes like the X-15 and the X-22. All of these. There's always this X
Well,
stagger.
Malcolm X, he had a regular name and then he got rid of it because it was his
Yep.
white name. And
Yep.
so he just made it X.
Yep.
He's kind of the guy that started it, if you think about it.
Hmm.
Wasn't really around until Malcolm X did it. He was from Omaha, by the way, my hometown.
So
Yep. And he claimed that he saw a KKK raid when he was a young kid in Omaha. And I checked and there was no KK outfit at that time in Omaha. So I know he's BSing on that one. But anyway, I digress. Um, yeah, so what do you think is going on here? We moving into a new, it seems like Seems like the rulers are moving us into a new phase of things here.
Well, I think actually what's happening is a breakdown of control. That their ability, because this Agenda 2020 was supposed to be done in 2020, then it got raised to 2030, and they have this whole plan to enslave the human race and digitize everything and the central currency where they could, if you don't obey, they shut you off, and if you do obey, they send you into the vaccination centers. And they want to depopulate the earth to what that like the Georgia Guidestones like 500 million, but now with AI and robots, well, they don't even need 500 million. So I think this, and like what's going on right now in the Middle East, well, what's going to happen? There's going to be famines all over the world because that the Persian Gulf supplies fertilizers, helium for the chips, all kinds of key things come out of there, and
Plant your garden, guys. This is the time. I'm doing it right now.
Mhm.
I have 25 boxes planted before the end of May. So I think you guys need to grow food. It's going to get serious.
Yeah, so that's something that people need to think about. Buying some of the extra food, bang sticks, and the things that power them, and water purification. Because it's going to cause famine now. And if the war starts up on Monday and they start bombing the Iranian power plants and other infrastructure, the Iranians are going to take out the infrastructure of the Persian Gulf nations, including the oil production facilities, which take years and years to repair, and now you've lost.
Salinization.
Yeah, desalination. So you're going to have those countries will collapse. The oil production will be permanently stopped now. I mean, there's places like Australia, they got like 1 week of fuel left. And even in Europe, they're going to run out of jet fuel in 2 weeks, right?
Well, I hear that's the plan, and
Yeah,
that
and
they
that's
want Trump wants all the oil to be everybody to buy American oil,
but the thing is that that's going to
Venezuelan
also
oil.
result in famine and the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. Well, if he's doing that, then that's just like pure evil. Where to make more money for American oil companies, he ends up killing hundreds of millions of the third world.
Well,
And in Asia,
no, they wouldn't die because their tankers would just come here.
yeah, oh no, but there's not enough oil to go around.
Oh yeah, there
It's,
is.
but the
Oh no,
price,
there is. I asked Grok. We have enough. Canada, Mexico, United States, and Venezuela. We have 2/3 of the world's oil supply, something
oh
like
yeah,
that.
but to get it out of the ground, into the tankers, then back to those countries, we don't have the distribution and the refining capacity.
Do
We're
not have the refining capacity.
Yeah,
And
because the United States is right, like they shut down the last refinery in California. And California gets most of its gas, by the way, from the Middle East and overseas. And so that's why you find the gas prices in California are so high now, because like Australia used to have its own oil refining capacity. They were a net oil, a
now they
refined
got rid
products,
of it.
but they destroyed their entire refining capacity. Now they don't, they only have enough refining capacity to do what, 10% of what they used to do. Even though they're a net oil exporter and a net gas exporter, they have no capacity to turn that into like fuel to run their country. So, and the California did the same thing, that kind of the green insanity,
Yeah, that was
and
insane.
they shut down their.
Especially because California actually has a lot of oil.
Oh yeah, but it doesn't have refineries to turn it into anything. And it has actually you'd have to like send it offshore to get refined, usually in Singapore or South Korea. And that's what Australia was doing because it was quote cheaper or more efficient due to their free trade bullshit. They send the oil from Australia
But
to.
wouldn't the sudden increase of oil price cause a um, this cold fusion research that would really make it go?
Oh yes, it would. In fact, that's exactly what's happening.
I think
Now
it could
in
be the
Asians,
plan.
it's probably in the billions from what I can determine. They've suddenly thrown billions of dollars into this stuff, and obviously the DOE here has put some money into it because they don't have a choice out. If you can turn every gallon of seawater into 100 gallons of gasoline equivalent, well, you don't have to depend on oil from the Middle East anymore. You're energy independent, and when they could put up a blockade, you can just tell them to go bug, basically, what, and
Yeah.
because we don't care, that, and that's power goes away. The power to it doesn't matter if you have blockades because you can make all your energy from seawater. Big deal. We don't care.
Well, I hear also they're going to build a pipeline and not even go through the straits anymore. But
Oh, they do have one, but the thing is that can easily get blown up, and that's what's going to happen Monday if they start a war, attacking Iran, going after Iran's oil infrastructure or its power infrastructure. Iran will respond and take out the stuff in the Persian Gulf, and
what I
it'll just
would
be all
do
chaos and anarchy.
if I was Trump, I would just blockade the Straits of Hormuz and only let my friends through.
Yeah,
I,
but the thing is, the Iranians aren't going to let his friends through, and they're not going to let, and Trump won't let
but
the
I
others, so
mean,
nothing
what I'm
gets
saying
out.
is no more ships can get out for oil for Iran.
But if they do that to Iran, that's what Iran said. No, we're going to
Iran
block
will
it.
go
We're going
broke
to
in
shut it
like
down for everybody.
Iran will go broke in a week
Yeah,
if they
but
can't
the
sell
thing
that
is that
oil. They
yeah,
have nothing else to sell. If you stop those ships from going out, Iran is done. You don't have to fire a shot. Just make
well,
that the ships are blocked, and the whole system will fall apart. There'll
well,
be
actually, Iran's
food,
got so
there'll
many
be no
tankers.
water,
Yeah.
there'll be no money for anything. Uh, the people will rebel. That's what I think that he's going to do. I don't think he's
Well,
going
that's
to
he's hoping,
fire
but
a
in
shot.
the meantime, but will they break the Iranians? It's the Iranians. People don't understand that's 1,000-year-old civilization, and
Five
they,
thousand.
yeah, 5,000-year-old civilization. They said that they thought they would pull off of Venezuela. They had kidnapped
No.
Maduro and
There's no
everybody
way they thought
bent
that
over. They
because
thought they could.
the
Yeah,
geography precludes that.
I know the Iranians will fight. They're going to fight. They martyrdom is the way to go for them, and so
I don't
no, they
think they ever thought they were going to do a Venezuelan thing. I think
yeah.
the whole thing is being done to strangle Lloyd's of London, strangle the British bank, because British Petroleum is who is drawing all of Iran's oil, and they always have been since oil was discovered. They've never gone away. When Mossadegh tried to nationalize it, we got rid of him and put the Shah. Then the Shah, at the last few years, started saying some funny stuff about who really runs the world, and
Yep,
then
and
he
he
was
didn't last
gone.
long.
Then they put in Khomeini, and Khomeini agreed that British Petroleum could continue, right, pumping out the oil. And it's in British interest to keep everybody at odds with each other.
But
That,
the
that's
Iranians got
what
a
they're
better deal.
great at.
Yeah, remember my dad was actually the ranking military officer in the Middle East during the whole Iranian crisis. And so when that Ayatollah he came in. So I'm not going to talk too much on that, in private. But
Uh,
yeah, the story that they tell you and the
it's
story which
not
actually
real.
happened are two different
I
things.
know what
Remember,
your dad told you,
yeah,
and I agree with it completely. That's what I
remember,
always thought.
remember when our embassy got taken over by the Iranians?
Oh yeah.
At the same time, they took over the Soviet embassy. And the Soviet leader, one of the Soviet leaders, called Iran and said, "The bombers are in the air. Get your people out of it." Within 45 minutes, all the Iranians were out of the Soviet embassy. Okay, in 45 minutes. But
We
Jimmy
wanted it to
Carter,
happen.
yeah, because their bombers were in the air. They're going to go start bombing Iran, and so because an embassy is sovereign territory, and so they don't tell you that story of what went on. And then, of course, the minute Reagan got put in,
It was
after
gone.
444 days, they immediately released him, and it came out later that the Republicans were paying the Iranians huge amounts of money
Yeah.
to keep the
Bush.
hostages there so Jimmy Carter would not get reelected.
That's right.
And that's
Bush.
why the very moment that Ronald Reagan was sworn in, all the hostages were released. And they were making So there's a whole
Yeah,
bunch
it
of
was
back and
George
forth
Bush. He
stuff.
made a secret deal. He
Yeah,
flew to
exactly.
Iran and made a secret deal and said, hold him until January 20th.
Yep.
And they did. And
Yep, and then they released him exactly the same exact moment, and so there's like a whole bunch, and that's how there's a whole bunch, and then they were going to whack Reagan, but that didn't work out too well.
Bush's business partner's son is who shot Reagan.
Well, that's what they say, but I was there. I was actually watching live when Connie Chung came on, and she said there were two shooters. I literally, that it never came up again. She said, well, there was one on the ground and then there was one on the roof. And the dude, remember when they took Reagan into the thing, they lifted up his arm and the bullet went right there in where there was no protection. And it was an explosive bullet. It was supposed to have exploded. And if it had, Reagan would have been dead. But for some reason, it did not explode.
Yeah, it was a flashé.
It was supposed to explode. It was
Yeah,
explosive, but it
it's
didn't
like
explode.
razor sharp, and it's got a little explosive in it.
And
And
it didn't explode. And that's why Reagan stayed alive. And
yeah,
so,
the doctors operate were 3 hours on Reagan, something
yeah.
like that, looking for it, and then they finally found it, and they never reported it or took a picture of
Yeah,
it.
exactly. And I never saw the thing Connie Chung said there was two shooters because she was there. She saw the second shooter on the roof, right? And she reported it.
And
And then that was cut off and you never heard it again. And
you
that was the
remember
real shooter.
when John Chancellor, remember the anchorman for NBC? He was reading a story about the uh, John Hinckley's dad being business partners with George Bush. Remember
Yep.
that? And he's like,
Yep.
"What the hell is this?" He just
Yep.
got so angry.
Yep. Well, I think there was a third party involved in this because you
Yeah.
know there was because then they'd have that over George Bush. They could might have been able to get rid of Reagan and then get rid of Bush and then put their super selected person in charge. Because you know George Bush HW did have a problem with a certain people, right?
Well, his wife looks an awful lot like Aleister Crowley, and her mom
Oh
did.
yeah. Oh, actually, that's yeah. Oh no, that's yeah. George W is the grandson of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah,
W, but
her mom, who was the Price, the Price. Do we have a President Price?
yeah, I think we did. But she was. Let's say she was a single mother.
Her
After she hung out with
mom,
the cult and Aleister Crowley's cult, and then she came back to America pregnant. And
she went there to attend a party in Paris of Aleister Crowley's, and she came back, and 9 months later, she had Barbara.
yep,
And her husband, she was married, her husband threw her in a mental institution where
yep.
she died. And when Ozzy Osbourne visited W at the White House, uh, W ran up to Ozzy and said, "Oh, dude, you're my mom's favorite band, Black
Yep.
Sabbath."
Yeah, it's Black Sabbath. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was. Yeah, I guess I'd heard from you know the mother of Barbara Bush. She wasn't didn't just attend a party. She kind of was a cult follower of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, she was kind of a, well, let's say she liked to sleep around. Let's just put it.
Yes, yes. And so she was kind of a cult groupie for him for a while.
Yeah.
So wasn't just one party. So yeah, that's and you know, but you know what George H.W. Bush said about W? He
What?
said he got his mother's brains. She wasn't the brightest bulb in in you know the constellation.
Yeah, well, George H.W. Bush is a very, very evil person.
Yeah, well, and then Prescott Bush above him, and we see that actually the degeneration of like the ruling class, and I think that's what a lot's what's happening because you know you had like Prescott Bush, then you had H.W. Bush, and then you had W.
And now
And
there's nothing.
now there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing, and it's the same way. You know, we used to have Henry Kissinger. Now we got Jared Kushner and Wolkoff, right? I mean, these are just like, I mean, they think that the ruling class is so degenerated that they're just incapable of like, I mean, they have evil thoughts, but they're not capable of actually implementing anything because they're too incompetent.
So I was watching, must have been about 10 years ago. I was watching Netflix. It was a documentary, and it was about this guy who owned a investment house in the World Trade Center. And on 9/11, attended his son's first day at school.
Oh,
And
yes, yes, I've seen that same video. Yes.
that was
And
Whitcomb.
yeah, and then, yeah, Witkoff. And then there's
That was
also
Whitcomb.
the,
That's
yeah,
our
yeah, that,
Secretary of Treasury
oh, and then remember Silverstein, like he'd always go to have breakfast on
that,
that, but
that
but
morning.
that one day he just didn't couldn't go, and then somehow some special dual citizen judge gave him two insurance
Double
rewards
indemnity.
because there was two terrorist acts, because two planes, right? And
Yeah.
then all the money came out of some West German retirement fund.
You know what I think, actually? Here's what I think happened on 9/11. Because I was watching, I was living in the middle of nowhere when it happened, and the only radio stations I could get were, regular radio stations. And one of them was an NPR station. And they were doing pretty extensive covering of 9/11. So I was listening to it. And they were interviewing people. And they interviewed this woman. She said, "I just knew something was wrong." And he said, "Well, why?" Because my husband is a janitor in building one of the World Trade Center, and he calls me every morning at 5 a.m. to get me up so that I can go to work. And that morning, no call came. I'm thinking, wait a minute, wait a minute. 5 a.m. The plane didn't bomb until 9 a.m.
Oh
How
yeah, they
wait,
actually have things that when they went into like
hang
the
on, let me
base.
finish.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so so when the firemen first came in to the building, they found a truck. There's an underground road. They found a truck filled with gold
Oh
of
yeah, that one.
construction. And what I think happened is that the same people that were wiring up the building and all that, that they robbed the 21 banks that were located in both buildings that night. So they had to sequester everybody that was there into a room probably and lock it, right? So the guy couldn't call his wife, right? And they robbed him and they didn't get the last truck out
Oh
before.
yeah, and the fire people that came in after the plane had hit, the entire first floor was destroyed.
Yeah.
And the basements were all destroyed because that's what when you take out a building, you want to get to its foundation first. So they when the plane hit at the same time the basement exploded, destroying like the core infrastructure. And you could see that because I was sitting actually with a couple of steel guys. One of them had worked on the like the pyramid in Vegas. And these guys were like the steel guys that built skyscrapers. And when they saw it go down, they said that is a controlled demolition because they built those
It's more than that because I was
like
there at ground zero.
you could see them. You could just go
I
boom,
was
boom,
at
boom, boom,
ground
boom, boom,
zero
boom,
about
boom.
a week after it happened. I was standing right next to the pile. The entire pile was less than 2 stories tall.
Oh yeah, no, they actually designed. No, they
Fifty
designed all.
thousand, 50,000 file cabinets, 50,000 desks, 50,000 phones, 50,000, all sorts of probably couches and chairs, all crushed down into less than 20 feet
Oh no, no,
tall.
they actually designed skyscrapers that way. They build the basement big enough to hold it when they collapse because they got the design not for running it but also for collapsing it. And in the World Trade Center
There's no
towers,
way.
the
No way.
steel they put up, they actually the steel that was up had holes in it for
No,
when you could put
no,
demos in it.
no, no, no. They turned those towers got turned into dust.
Hmm.
If you watch it, they're turning into dust as they're coming down.
Yeah, you can see the explosions. Boom, boom, boom,
Oh,
boom,
they're
boom, boom,
hitting
boom,
it with
boom.
satellite. That
Yeah.
woman wrote the book.
Oh yeah, I've read that book, and then you also find all the what do they call that? Thermite spheres just
There's
everywhere in
definitely
the dust.
thermite. Yep,
I mean, they took that, and you could if you see those like you see those
yep.
sliced, and the Chinese got that. They all stripped that steel and sent it to China, and I'll bet you 100% that the Chinese, like the Chinese government was there, and when the steel came off, they had dudes take out special, and they find a certain thing, they cut it out, and they put it in a little museum somewhere. So they've got all the goods on that because they're very efficient at that kind of way.
Yeah. Well, that
And
was.
then one of these days they can pull it out. Their intelligence agencies are probably the best in the world. So yeah, believe me, they knew everything. When I was communicating with like foreign businesses or governments, they were the first ones to know about it. And I'm not going to tell my means and methods, but yeah, it's amazing how thorough their system is.
All right, Ken. I got to get going here. I will put all your information below for everyone to see, and you can learn about Moxie Fusion, C60, and any links that you want me to put up, send me. And thanks for being on.
Great.
Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm going to try to do this kind of stuff more, but it is summer and I'm going to be really busy. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Jay, and thank you very much.